I mentioned a moment ago that there are some accelerators, and I talked about digital. We talked about partnership. I think another one is young people. And that's where we're going to kick off today, because it's very easy, again, to get the sense that nothing is possible, that we're gridlocked and stuck until you go and talk to a young person, until you see the opportunity through their eyes. And a lot of what's moving, whether it's big corporations changing the way they do business or new social entrepreneurs coming on the scene and saying, hey, I got a new approach to this. A lot of what's shifting is through young people. And so we wanted to start there today to think about the future. And I'll ask this fantastic panel that we've got for you this morning to please join me up here on stage. Good morning. It is so good to be with you. Like I said, this is an opportunity, I hope, to really energize our audience here and online around what's possible. And what we're thinking really is about the future, as you might understand, as you're going to hear from a number of leaders who think about this every day. And I want to start maybe with you, Derek, if I can, because you're the only person in the world who has your job, okay? It's a job title most of us have not heard of for a good reason. You're the Future Generations Commissioner for Wales. And there's no other country in the world that has that job. And I remember reading about this and thinking about it. It's an interesting role, but it's also an interesting idea. So tell us a little bit of what is that job, and why do you think other countries ought to have it?
It's a great job title, first of all, isn't it? I mean, it is the world's coolest job title. And my job, effectively, is to advocate for the interests of future generations. So those people who are not yet born. So it's not a youth agenda primarily. It's a long-term foresight agenda. And I think what we have in Wales is a model. It's not a perfect model, but it's a model for embedding long-term thinking into public policy making. So we know governments are notoriously bad at thinking beyond the next election, the next budget cycle. And this is an attempt, a requirement for our government, our local authorities, our municipalities, our health boards, our national parks, all the public sector organisations in Wales to set in place long-term plans to help us meet our long-term vision for the country. So it's working towards a positive vision for the country, which we call our well-being goals, which is our way of legislating for the SDGs. And I think we're still the only country in the world to have legislated for the SDGs. People might tell me otherwise, but I don't know of another country that's legislated for the delivery of the SDGs. And we are behind schedule across the world in delivering on the SDGs. So this is a way of mandating our public sector bodies to work towards those.
I have the feeling, but you tell me, that your fellow government officials might get annoyed occasionally when they get a phone call from you thinking, hey, I've got enough problems to deal with today, and you're asking me to think about what's coming in the future. Has this actually worked to change their mindsets too, having someone in your role?
Well, I think it's my job to be a bit of a thorn in the side. And I mean, that's part of the role, isn't it? But I try to do that constructively, and I completely understand the pressures they're under. I mean, we have had budget cuts in our public sector. So they will tell me, we've got a queue of ambulances or a waiting list as long as your arm for X, Y, and Z. How can you expect me to be focusing on the long term when we've got these immediate issues? And my response to this is varied, I guess, but this is about a cultural change as much as legislation. This is about a mindset of thinking long term whilst you're also thinking short term. So if you don't have that mindset of thinking of long term trends or what we need to be doing for 50 or 75 years, you're never going to find the solutions that are right for today and right for the long term. So it's a cultural change, and it is making big changes in Wales. I mean, I'm impatient for more change and more rapid change, and that's my job to be so. But it is creating a different way of governing in Wales, which is making a difference both for today and for tomorrow.
I wonder, Xiye, Bastida, if you can tell us how you think about this mindset. Okay, you're a climate campaigner. You're from Mexico. You co-founded the Re-Earth Initiative. There's plenty of people who think the climate crisis, while it's real and it's here and it's now, we've got other things we've got to work on now. And you might argue the political winds are going in the wrong direction on climate. And yet you're out there campaigning and pushing. How do you think about your role in this? in a week like UN General Assembly and Climate Week, when world leaders are talking about lots of things, but climate is having a hard time getting to the place it might deserve in the agenda?
Hello. Oh, awesome. Well, thank you. And Derek, thank you so much for your work. I will just give a little bit of background about the state of the youth climate movement, because I'm sure you all remember us in the streets, hundreds of thousands of us out there. And I was actually the organizer for the climate strikes here in New York, with 300,000 people walked out 5 years ago now. Thank you. And the energy was high. It was right before the pandemic. We got all the schools in New York City to let kids walk out, over 500 high schools, over 1 million kids in the public school system in the city. And it was a moment where everything felt possible. And when anything feels possible, you are encouraged to dream. Dream about a future that is not just the apocalypse that they tell us about, but positive futures. But what I realized quickly is that people don't respond well to you yelling at them. And that is what a lot of activism was. It was confrontational. So I started to think about not how I fight better, not how we organize better, not how we confront people better, but how do we collaborate better, and how we can get to the next point of the climate movement, which for me is ensuring long-term sustainability, not only for youth of today. I'm going to be 48 in 2050. So for me, the 2050 targets are super important, also for my future kids and grandkids. But coming from an indigenous community, I come from a community in central Mexico, and we have something called the 7-generation principle, where we think of the past 7 generations for wisdom and the future 7 generations in terms of their stability. And you might think that 7 generations is a lot, but if you think of yourself, your mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, daughter, granddaughter, great-granddaughter, each of us is at the center of 7 generations. So 7 generations is actually not that long-term thinking, and it's people who we love. And I will love somebody who's alive in the year 2100, and we're looking at around 3 to 4 degrees of warming by then right now. So this is people who will be in our lives. This is people who we will have interest about. Not to say that we should just make sure that we are having a healthy planet for the future. And Derek, the reason why I said thank you so much for your job is because me and my friends were exactly asking this question. We have now frameworks for rights of nature. We are looking into children's rights, but nobody was talking about rights of future generations except you and the Wales government. So when we looked up rights of future generations, Wales is the only thing that came up. And me and my friends started a initiative called the Future Generations Tribunal, because we want to make sure that future generations have rights. We want to make sure that future generations have the right to live within the planetary boundaries, which is the science that tells us the safe operating zone of 9 geological systems on Earth, not just carbon, because carbon is not all of nature. And the climate movement has been obsessed with net zero and carbon only, when we need to look at it holistically. So we are fighting not only for our world as youth in the climate space, but also because we want future generations to have access to joy. At the end of the day, the climate crisis is violence of flooding, of displacing, instability. But what we really need is to turn it around and make sure that future generations have the right to thrive. And I think all of us here are trying to do that work. And thank you for the opportunity to share about what we're doing.
We're thrilled to hear it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond very quickly. One of the things I should have said, and I try to say each time, is we're indebted to Indigenous populations for our approach and learning from behaviours that are normal in parts of the world and used to be much more normal in many other parts of the world. When we were building cathedrals in Europe, people didn't expect to see that cathedral finished. They were doing it for future generations. So thank you for saying that. And I heard a great expression this week about the rights of future generations, and someone put it this way. They said, we don't discriminate on the grounds of, or we shouldn't discriminate on the grounds of where people are born, so we also shouldn't discriminate on the grounds of when they were born. And I thought that summed it up really nicely.
Amazing message. Amel, you have really done the thing that people said was impossible and crazy. If you look at the global development sectors and you divide them up, very often education is put in the too hard pile. And people, philanthropists in particular, say, I'm going to do global health. I'm going to focus on agriculture. I'm going to get into financial inclusion. But education, it's so polarizing. It's bureaucratic. It's slow. You were in the private sector. You were the first woman to be Minister of Tourism in Tunisia. You kind of could have gone anywhere. And you decided to go through that crazy, too hard door. And you created the Education Outcomes Fund. Why did you decide to do that? And what is the opportunity you see that you think this community may be missing?
No, thank you very much. I have to say we're standing on the shoulders of people like Henrietta here. For she was the one who enabled us actually to have a home at the UN. So Henrietta, thank you for that. And thank you for believing in something crazy. You know, when you start something, the crazy people are the ones who are doing it, and I hope it gets to a stage where the crazy people are the ones who are not doing it. But we look, for me personally, when I was member of government, I was member of government of the Arab Spring, as you know, and it was like a massive transformation movement, and Tunisia got the Nobel Peace Prize at the end of our work in 2015. But there was a moment that really deeply, deeply impacted me, and it was when I met with the Minister of Interior to talk about security. And really, we don't have much time, so I'm going to say it very shortly. There was a moment he said, I'm going to show you a PowerPoint with some photos of young people that we feel are as a risk to become terrorists. And I had this, I probably lived a lot in the West. I had this very Western brainwashed idea of this is going to be middle-aged, ugly-looking man with big beards and stuff like that. And then when I saw these photos, they looked exactly like my children. These were like 16, 17-year-old. You know, it was really shocking. So photo after photo after photo. And then I had also the chance or opportunity or I don't know, applied to say to talk with people who came back from Syria. So in a de-radicalization program. And the motivation was zero religious. And I think big research in the US are showing that as well. For them, it was a job. And so when I left that meeting, I sat in my car, I literally cried because I felt we have failed these young people. This is our responsibility. And so when we said the Education Outcomes Fund is like, why are we failing? Like why 73% of children in low middle income countries can read and write at the end of primary school? This is insane. And in sub-Saharan Africa, is 9 out of 10 children. Why the World Bank tells us 2/3 of skills program have absolutely no impact on earning or employment. And so we said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to pay for those results. We're going to pay for a young person that has a meaningful and planetary positive job. We're going to pay for a girl that moved from primary, secondary, stays there so she doesn't get married early. And people were like, okay, if you're going to pay at the end, if you're going to tell government your taxpayer money, your philanthropic money is only going to pay at the end, who the hell is going to pre-finance this? Who the hell is going to pay for this? And we're like, we're going to find this money on the capital market. We're going to find money with social investor. And everyone is like, are you insane? We work like a country in Sierra Leone, which is like Ebola crisis, civil war, low income. There's like no one is going to believe and invest in these young people and a promise that you guys are going to achieve results. And fast forward, we were 3 times oversubscribed. We always believed when you build it right, by building really a partnership between government, civil society, private sector, when you set the right outcomes in the middle and have amazing partner. We have in Sierra Leone, for example, 5 partners from local NGO to international ones, that you can attract people. So now we are in 6 countries. We've raised over $135 million. We work with 500,000 children and expanding globally.
I've actually sat in David Sange's office in Sierra Leone, Freetown, and heard him talking excitedly about this because this is one of those opportunities where you say private investors are willing to back the young kids in Sierra Leone. They see the opportunity there in a system that's broken, that's tough, right? And you've created that sense of hope and optimism I tried to bring to our conversation right at the beginning, that there is possibility here. It's something, Henrietta, you've done your entire career. You don't really need an introduction to this audience, but Henrietta Fore, of course, was the head of UNICEF, the executive director there, was the administrator of USAID. You've sat on many public company boards and NGO boards. You run your own business today, Holsman International. I guess I wonder if you can tell us, having been a leader in this idea of youth and education, sort of where we are now and what's the unlocking opportunity. Given all the doom and gloom across the street where you used to work, what's the opportunity now if we just focus here?
Thanks, Raj. So I'd like to add in that being the executive director of UNICEF is one of the cool job titles so that we don't miss that one. Yeah, exactly. But what Amel is doing, I think, is one of the real trends, which is we're trying to get more private money paired with public money focused on outcomes so that we can move things in the world, whether it's education or health or any of the issues that we have in the world. This public-private finance is one whose time has come. So I think that one is one, Raj, you've been looking at for Devex. I think this is a key for all of us. I also think, when you're at UNICEF, you really think about children and you think about them at the youngest age. So things like early childhood development is really important. And only half of the children in the world ever have a chance at early childhood education. This is the preschool. And it is very powerful because it begins to get the nourishment for brains, both intellectually and doing play, but also it's nutrition and you learn how to be a parent. So I think one of the things that is still available for the world to do is early childhood education everywhere in the world. It would be a huge game changer. Another one that you know from me is I really think we need to connect every school in the world to the internet. I think there's just going to be a huge group of young people who will not have a chance to be like their colleagues, their age mates, because they don't have a connectivity and they're being left behind. So if we could connect every school in the world, if we can help train you how to be an entrepreneur so that you can make a job for yourself, young people, I mean, look at Xiye. It's great. You want lots. You want to clone her. So you think about the world to come and you think about what we can do to help. I think there are a lot of these possibilities. And if we just think together creatively, it is a world of opportunities.
Amel, maybe you could just expand on that in terms of what are the innovations happening in the education space. You've got one of the most important, which is the public-private money coming together to support this. But for people who still think, and as you know, there's a lot of philanthropists you and I talk to who they have a hard time getting their heads around this area and they want someone else to do it. What are they missing? What is the innovation opportunity in education that can accelerate us?
No, I think it's there are fantastic things happening there. Even in some of our program, we've seen. So we work with partners on the ground. They've been using more AI, for example, to support a teacher prep for lessons or to help communities, find out, to help countries find out where are, for example, most of the school children and how can you integrate them back. So I think technology and AI. Despite I have sometimes worry about democracy and etc. I think in education it is changing and it's going to change even more massively how fast and how cheap we can reach out to people and advertise making other stars like yesterday we had Khan Academy CEO and founder and their tool with personal tutoring for children, started at a price of kind of $500 going down to kind of $130, and now they're at a $5 per child per year, and it's going to go further down where basically every child can get customized learning. And I know there is a hype, and everyone who reads a book about AI pretends to be an AI expert, and we have to be careful. But I do believe that's one big trend that is gonna change education and allow us also to reach our children. And the other piece, which I feel is really important, is around mental health. I mean, philanthropists or government may not want to spend in education, but we have a big mental health crisis among young people in the world. And only 2% of global health is spent on mental health. And in many countries, it's zero. And so the question for me is, do we want a depressed generation to grow up? And while Xiye, I mean, I love what you're doing and what you're seeing. I have myself 2 teenage daughters, and I see the numbers in the UK. I think 4 out of 5 teenage girls have, mental health issues with self-harm and et cetera, et cetera. And even my daughter tells me, you grew up in a world, it's where I had hope of build. And sometimes she feels she's 20, she's studying design engineering. She's in a world where it's about preventing the worst from happening, be it in climate crisis, be it in insecurity of employment, et cetera, et cetera. So I do feel that there is a huge opportunity there to kind of help a future generation build hope.
Henrietta?
There's one other area that I think sometimes we forget, which is that if you actually put young people to work, that you're learning something when you're doing it. So in Seoul, Korea, the mayor said, I'm going to set aside this budget, and the young people are going to decide how it's going to be spent. That is very good training. It is an education in how to operate a city, how to actually look after all the people in your city and their needs, and so that you learn by doing it. And that learning by doing is a huge gift to the world, and we have to do more of that. It's part of being an entrepreneur and developing new products and services, but get out there and do it.
And you can see how personalized instruction through AI can actually facilitate that, right? You can find out where each person is, what their level is, what their area of expertise is, and get them into the right opportunities. Derek, just as we start closing out the conversation, I understand that people at the UN this week have been thinking about your job and thinking about making you not the only one in the world. So what is that conversation like at a moment when everybody is so constrained? They're thinking about the scarcity of resources. They're actually thinking we should do something about this even at the UN.
Yeah, so you will hear from Michelle Griffin, I understand, later in the session from the UN, who will talk about the Pact for the Future. But because there was an agreement around the Pact for the Future this week, there was a declaration on future generations, an annex to the Pact, and it's committing countries around the world, as well as the multilateral national institutions, to think about long-term thinking and find practices that they can put in place to improve that around the world and improve capabilities around strategic foresight and futures thinking and looking at the long-term trends that face the world. So yeah, it's been a humbling and an honor to be able to share our story in Wales and find out also what other countries are doing too. So we've had countries come to us and say, we're really keen to have a Future Generations Commissioner ourselves, and how do you do it, and how is it going to work in our context? It's not a cookie cutter approach. It needs to be adapted for the country that it serves. But there are other ways that this is being done around the world. And Finland, for example, has a parliamentary committee that scrutinizes and holds the government to account to make sure it's thinking long-term and future generations. So there are lots of different models that have been discussed this week. But what needs to happen now is we move from words to action. Yeah. So that a lot of good words were spoken, and now practical implementation needs to happen at government level, at the UN level, at subnational level.
But words to action, I think, is what you do, Xiye. So maybe you can close us out on this point. For those here who don't really think about intergenerational equity, it's a new idea, and it's hard to think about how they integrate it into their work. For this community of development professionals and leaders, what can they take away from this idea of intergenerational equity that might change the way they actually work day to day?
Well, something that I noticed also in the declaration for future generations is that everybody has a different idea of what the future is, or what it should be, or what it entails. So I thought the declaration would just be about climate and how we need a climate-safe world and an environmentally safe world. But there was technology, there was education, there was peace and security. There were so many things that I didn't think about because my whole world is just solving the climate crisis. And then other people might have just thought of economic stability in the future. And because we all have different views of what the world should be, that is why we should get together. Because if not, our future will not be complete. It will not have all of the different perspectives that we each have. And we should think ourselves as how all of the trees in a forest are connected by mycelium underneath. We usually, and this is something that my friend Michaela Loach said, she said, in the climate movement, we are used to seeing the mushrooms, the trees, the things that come out, the beautiful things. But what really matters is the web of mycelium underneath, the connectors that communicate all of the forest together. And even though we might only see the mushrooms, we need to focus on the growth of that mycelium and those roots. And so these connections that we're having right now is us being the mycelium that connects, because you all know that a tree is only as strong as its roots. The way that the roots grow is how tall the tree will stand. And that's who we need to be for the future. the roots that go deep, the roots that are connected for the future to have a chance to be standing tall. And we cannot get to that future unless we have youth in decision-making positions alongside all of you, because we love to talk about youth without including youth. We love to talk about generalizing youth and how all the youth are depressed, or they don't care about anything, or they're only on TikTok. But have you talked to a young person and asking them what they want their future to look like as well? And I'm telling you, since I started asking for that shift on including youth in decision making, now I sit on the advisory board for Rockefeller Foundation. I am part of the Planetary Guardians, which is this group of 19 incredible icons, including former presidents, business people like Sylvia Earle. I'll just drop her name there because she's incredible. And if we don't have those intergenerational present decision-making bodies, the future will be missing the perspectives of youth. So my invitation to all of you is, don't make decisions without somebody younger sitting next to you and somebody older sitting next to you as well.
That's a fantastic message. And for this community and for all of our work, thank you. Thank you, this panel. Please join me in thanking this fantastic panel. Xiye, Bastida, Derek Walker, Amel, Karboul, Henrietta, Fore had to step out. Thank you so much. It's been a great way to start today.